Okay, welcome back to video number 2 in this series. I'm calling it Start with One. So in order to take a journey, you got to start with that first step, and this is going to take you from no understanding about how to make a website page to understanding how to make a website. So in the first video, I just sort of broke down how the internet works. In the second video, we're actually going to get into the code, and we're going to write HTML code. You can use anything you want to. I'm on a PC, so I'm using the Notepad program. All you have to do is click your Windows button or go to the Start menu and just start typing Notepad, and you can click on that. There's also another program that you can do called Notepad++, and it's a little bit fancier version of Notepad, but I learned how to build websites on Notepad, and this is literally a program. You either have it on the Mac or you have it on a PC. It's called something different on Mac, maybe Typepad or something, I don't know. But you have a bare bones editing program that you can create HTML files with. You don't need anything fancy, but as you grow as someone who can make websites, having those dedicated programs that are just for writing code, it really helps because it gives you some sort of shortcuts and things like that that just make writing the code a lot easier. But in this instance, we're just going to go with good old Notepad, and you just have this blank screen right here. And in order to create our first HTML document, we have to put at the very top of the document, what sort of document is this? So it's called a document type or a doc type. And for HTML, it used to be a lot more complicated, but now HTML uses these angle brackets a lot. You see it, it's the comma and the period down there with the shift key held. So you're going to be using that a lot. So we have it's the less than sign. I'm sorry, yeah, a less than sign. And then we have the exclamation mark. And then in all capital letters, we write doc type, put a space, and then you can do lowercase HTML. Now, it used to be a lot more complicated. It used to look, there was a lot more stuff out here, but as of the newest version of HTML, they've really simplified it. So in order to let the browser know what sort of file is this, it's an HTML file. And so whenever the browser is trying to read it, it starts here and just sort of moves down the page this way, left to right, top to bottom. And the first thing that it sees is that this is an HTML file, and it says, okay, I know what sort of file I'm dealing with, and now I can interpret it. It's sort of like knowing what language am I looking at. If you didn't know the language, it would be hard to interpret it. So when you open up a book and you say, this says, okay, this is Mandarin Chinese, okay, I know what I'm working with, now I can translate it. So that's sort of what's going on here. And then we have two parts to every HTML document. There is what's called the head, and another part that's called the body. So the head is largely made of stuff that you don't see, or at least you don't see it very readily, and whatever's inside the body is everything that is a part of, everything that's a part of the document. Now, HTML is somewhat of a funny language. It's a markup language. So in a lot of ways, we're just creating a lot of containers to hold things. So you have content like, hi, my name is Brian, and then you sort of wrap that content with these special tags, and it makes it do things. So because we have a lot of starting and ending tags, we have to sort of reflect that and remember that inside of our HTML. So this is an opening tag, and then we're going to have what we're going to call a closing tag. And so to close tags, we use the / and then we would say HTML. So you have the opening tag and you have the closing tag for HTML. Same thing goes for our head. And then we come down and we close it. And then anything that we write in between here is going to be contained in the head. You could also write it like this. It's fine. HTML is largely white space independent. So it does register one space, but it doesn't matter whether you use one space or 50 spaces, it's still only going to register one space. So you can actually sort of format HTML to make it a little bit easier to read because of that. But it also means that you have to do some other things if you want two spaces, between things. So the next section is called the body. And so you think of it just like a document, right? So you have the head of the document might be where you put the title, you put your name. If you've been to college and you've written research papers, it's all the stuff that sort of doesn't change. It's on the first page, or it's at the top in the header of the page, and it sort of goes from page to page. So this is very similar in that idea, but this is not actually output to the page. It's just all the stuff that you need to download in order to get the page ready. But whatever's inside the body, between these two tags right here, that's actually what's going to be shown on the page itself. So one thing that we often do, and this is one of the really good parts about having one of those more advanced editors, is that we usually have indentation to show us how, like what levels things are at. So this HTML is wrapping these two elements here. These two are on the same level, but they're wrapped inside of this HTML. But if it's all sort of left aligned, it's hard to tell sort of what is happening with that code. Some of the typical things that you have inside the head, because you can see I'm going to have to space it over every time now. Some of the typical things that you have inside the head, you can also use. You can use tabs. The tab spacing here is a little bit too much for me. I don't know if I have the option to change that or not. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think I have the option to change that, but in a dedicated program, you would be able to put this at 2 spaces or 5 spaces or whatever you want it to be so that you can see it more easily. So let's just go ahead and use what we have, and then I'm planning at some point to move over into it's called an IDE, Indigo Dog Elephant. And what it does is it just gives you some extra functionality to write the HTML and see it in different colors and things like that to sort of help you to read the code. But let's just stick with this for now, and then the next video maybe I'll go into that. So let's indent one more time because we're inside this head tag, so in between here, and this is going to include things like, we're just going to do the first one, which is a title. So every page has a title, whether you know it or not. And let's just pull one up. The title here is going to be shown in new tab. So if we go to google.com, up here, this part is the title. So sometimes you see it in the tab, sometimes you see it in other places on the website. But every machine who reads this code is going to read the title, and the title helps with search. So when someone searches for it on Google, they are actually, Google puts a lot of stock in the title of the page because the title is supposed to explain this is what this page is about. So what we are going to do eventually is create sort of a little bio or a portfolio for yourself. So what better project to do than one about yourself? This will allow you to to have a document online that you can point people to, and you can say, hey, if you want to know more about me, you can go here. We have something through LinkedIn usually, or Facebook, or places like that where we have a profile, but this is a controllable profile just for yourself. So if you quit all of those other uh, social media programs, you would still be able to have your own space on the web. It's a powerful thing for you to be able to have your own thing. It's connected to you. You're controlling it. You don't control any of those other websites or places to put your profile. If they want to change something, they change it. If they shut down, then you've lost everything that you put into it. But if you have your own space, it becomes your choice. If you can't afford it, it goes away. But if you can afford it, then you can just sort of carve out this space for yourself on the web, and that's one of the powerful parts of the web, and what it allows a regular individual to be able to do. Whatever I type inside this body is going to be shown, and if I give someone the URL to that page, they can see whatever I write. So that becomes a very powerful sort of, I mean, it can be millions of people see what you write. So it becomes a very powerful thing to be making your own space on the web. I believe in it a lot, and it's just sort of a big deal. So let's just put, I'll just put my name, since we're making this a personal sort of thing, and you would put your own name here. Don't put my name. And then inside the body, let's just write my name is Brian. Oftentimes, well, we could write hello world too. A lot of programming languages, the first thing that you write is hello world. And when we have plain text like this, it's just plain. There's nothing amazing about it. And I'll show you what happens if we just leave it like this. We need to supercharge this with our HTML, but I'll show you what it looks like whenever we don't have our supercharged HTML. So let's go ahead and save. Let's just save our document as something. So I'm just going to save it on the desktop, and you can see here that it's a .txt file. That's not what we want. TXT is just plain text. It's not going to allow the browser to read it. So we need to make it into either a .htm file or a .html. .html is more, it's just sort of a standard I think that people have moved into. HTML was early on when things were still sort of being worked out. So I advise you to use .html, although .htm does work. So let's call it our index.html. And so if you have no other pages on your website and you only have one file that's sitting on the server, and you go to whatever the URL is where that server folder is, and it looks in that folder, it's going to look for index.html first. You could also call it home.html, but index.html is going to be the first file that it looks for. And when it finds that, that's the first thing that it's going to serve to the visitor. So this is, in essence, your home page. So that is what a home page is. It's the first thing that you show visitors when they go to where the place where your folder is, where your URL points to. So let's just save it as index.html. I'm going to create a new folder in here. So it's going to be I'll just call it About Me. So in this folder, About Me, it's going to be like we're on a server right now. So my folder is going to be called About Me, and I'm going to put my index.html, and I'm going to save it. Make sure that you put .html. So now, when I go to my folder here, I have an index file, and then it says it's a Chrome HTML document. Now this would change if you're not using Chrome. It's just that Chrome sets itself as the default for opening HTML documents. But you can see what type it is. And when I click on this, it should open it in a new browser tab, and it should have what we wrote in the body. So here's my new website, my new page. It's being served not from a server somewhere out in the world. It's being served straight from my desktop. But my browser doesn't care. It's served an image, or it's served an HTML file, and then it outputs whatever's on there. So this is what we call local development. So you can develop a website only on your machine without the internet. You need the internet to go out and get new information and bring it back to your browser, and you need the internet to be able to put your files onto a server somewhere. But you do not need the internet in order to make a basic website. You can do it on an airplane. You can do it with no internet connection whatsoever. So all of the technologies that you need to be able to output to a website are actually built into the browser. So that's a really important part of this whole thing. But you can see here, because we did not supercharge our text, it just sort of writes it out as plain text on the page, and there is a space between because we put a line break, but it's just plain text. And what we want to do is we want to make this we want to make it have some hierarchy. So hello world, maybe that's the title of the entire page, and then my name is Brian is sort of a sub paragraph of that. Okay, so I'll show you how to go through, and we'll work on actually applying the HTML tags to different types of text to create things like headings and paragraphs and insert images and stuff like that. So if you stick with this long enough, you'll be able to build out a website pretty quickly, because there's not a lot to the HTML. The HTML is sort of the quick and easy part. It's formatting it, laying it out, doing some other things with another language called CSS that is a little bit more complicated. There's more variables and things to learn, but we'll get there, and we'll create a nice About Me index page. Alright, if you have any questions, you can leave your comments or questions down in the comments section below. Otherwise, move on to video number 3, and we'll start working with sort of the basics of headings and paragraphs.